Are the Revolutionary Guards in Iran recovering nuclear capabilities? What's happening at the Pickaxe Mountain, the Iranian nuclear facility that no one is talking about? Mysterious assassinations in Iran. The Revolutionary Guards are in panic moments before the funeral of Iran's former supreme ruler. And Trump revealed what he really thinks about Iran and did not hold back. Khamenei's funeral in Iran became a battlefield inside the Revolutionary Guards, and the rift at the top of Iran was exposed before the eyes of the entire world. And after the sanctions freeze, Iran is in talks to sell oil to Japanese companies. After the elimination of his predecessor in the Roar of the Lion War, Operation Midnight Hammer, Iran revealed the new commander of the Revolutionary Guards Navy. And Iran's foreign minister met with representatives of Hamas and Hezbollah. Iran is trying, at the same time, to rearm both Hamas in the Gaza Strip and Hezbollah terrorist organization in Lebanon. And an earthquake in Beirut. Are we beginning to see the beginning of the end of the Hezbollah terrorist organization, the organization built entirely under Iranian sponsorship? Hezbollah is in the middle of a war for survival, and in this war, it is probably going to lose. I'm Shoshani. Tonight, Yair Pinto is on vacation, and I'm replacing him because he too deserves to rest. And we are boots on the ground, bringing you the whole truth about what is happening in Israel, and also the whole truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. Today is July 5th, but hold on tight because it looks like the situation in the Middle East is heating up quickly. But before we get started, happy 4th of July and 250th to all my American friends. So let's begin. A new report by an American research institute reveals that while no significant return to activity has been recorded at the nuclear facility in Natanz, Fordow, and Isfahan, specifically there is activity in a facility known as Pickaxe Mountain. Vehicle movement and work to reinforce the tunnels were identified at the place. This is a mysterious nuclear facility, which to this day has not received any official reference from Iran, the United States, or from Israel. Now, in the past, the United States President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hinted at its existence, but did not detail what exactly is happening at the place. And according to foreign reports, the facility was dug at a depth of about 80 to 100 meters, or up to 300 feet, inside a granite mountain, and is considered one of the most fortified sites of the Iranian nuclear program. The funeral of the former supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, which began this week and continues over several days, was planned to serve as a show of power and unity by the Iranian regime after a period of fighting and severe tension with Israel and the United States. But as often happens in Iran, even an event that is supposed to project strength exposes the cracks from within. The Iranians, as in their way, turned the funeral into a show of strength. They invited dozens of leaders from around the world, and some of them even confirmed their arrival, which shows that Iran is still trying to present itself as a central player in the Middle East. And while the United States and Iran are trying to stabilize the interim agreement, Ali Khamenei's funeral, its procession turned into a show of strength by the regime, chants of death to America, revenge posters against Israel, and participants waving signs against US President Donald Trump. And meanwhile, without Khamenei's son being present, most of Iran's population has not known any leader than Ali Khamenei, whose funeral procession began yesterday with the participation of masses. That public is now waiting to see where the new leadership will lead and whether it will succeed in realizing Khamenei's vision, turning Iran into one of the central players in global geopolitics. Remember that this is a regime that oppressed and murdered as many as 40,000 of its own citizens in just a few days in order to maintain order, and still executes hundreds every month by hanging in order to hold on to power. And yet, the big question remains open. Who's really making the decisions right now in Iran? Even at his father's funeral, Mojtaba Khamenei, the new supreme leader, was not present. But senior figures from within the terrorist organizations supported by Iran arrived at the memorial ceremonies and the events surrounding them, alongside representatives from powers that maintain close ties with Tehran. The ceremonies are taking place only this week, 4 months after the elimination of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Now, according to the reports, Khamenei's son asked to participate in the funeral ceremonies and even to express his new status through participation in the main burial ceremony in the city of Mashhad. However, security officials opposed this out of concern that external elements would exploit the opportunity to harm him or to track his very location. His continued absence, alongside the absence of any public appearances, raises question marks inside the political system in Iran regarding his ability to exercise effective control over the country. And in parallel to the mourning ceremonies, a very strong internal struggle is taking place in Iran over the policy of negotiations with the United States. The rift is being exposed mainly inside the conservative camp, where open arguments are taking place between supporters of a pragmatic line and hardline elements that reject any compromise with Washington. The extremist camp is accusing the negotiation team of betrayal and is even calling for it to be put on trial. On the other hand, the more moderate camp claims that continued confrontation with the United States endangers the stability of the state and its economic condition. This debate is already moving beyond the traditional political frameworks and is becoming a public struggle that includes harsh statements, demonstrations, and mutual attacks in the state media. Recently, several unusual incidents were recorded that indicate the worsening of the internal struggle. The Speaker of Parliament, Mohammed Bakr Ghalibaf, was removed from a live broadcast while presenting details about a ceasefire agreement. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi was met with chants of condemnation during his visit to Iraq, and state media outlets have become a platform for strong attacks against elements involved in the negotiations. These events illustrate the depth of the division inside the Iranian political system and the erosion of the line between internal criticism and open confrontation within the regime. Now, at the same time, following the removal of the temporary sanctions on Iran, the National Iranian Oil Company has opened initial talks with the refineries in Japan to renew exports of crude oil for the first time since 2019. Now, the Japanese buyers are asking for a longer exemption period and safety guarantees for passage through the Strait of Hormuz, while the price of oil continues to be somewhere in the middle, a moderate price. And ahead of the grand celebrations of the 250th Independence Day of the United States President Donald Trump delivered a long, forceful, and festive speech at the foot of Mount Rushmore National Memorial in South Dakota. The speech dealt mostly with the American legacy, the historical achievements of the nation, and strong criticism of his domestic opponents. But as befits a speech by the 45th and 47th president, Trump did not miss the opportunity to fire off jabs and settle accounts with his rivals at home and abroad. First and foremost, the Islamic Republic of Iran. Right at the start of his remarks about the achievements of his administration and the military strength of the United States, Trump chose to focus on the countries that posed an ongoing challenge to the government in Washington. He said, "We brought America's enemies into the depths of history," the president declared with confidence. And then he added with open contempt towards hostile regimes, "We defeated Venezuela in a single day, and we routed Iran, hip and thigh." It's a biblical term. "They are dying to compromise now. They so badly want to reach an arrangement with us." Trump continued and sent a rather macabre public jab towards the regime in Tehran. With a cynical smile before the unenthusiastic crowd, or the enthusiastic, crowd, he said, "We gave them a week off to hold a funeral, only because we're nice. It is simply the truth." In this, Trump sought to emphasize the unshakable status of the United States and his message to Tehran: if you violate the understandings, Washington knows how to return and strike. And in parallel, United States President Donald Trump said yesterday in a phone interview with the Axios website that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu asked to meet with him at the White House and that the meeting could take place as early as this coming week. Will this be the meeting that is going to change the Middle East? And inside Iran, after the reports about the elimination of several Revolutionary Guard members in the west of the country, and about the mysterious death of a senior commander in a quote-unquote car accident, the Revolutionary Guard stated a short time ago that they had eliminated a terrorist cell that infiltrated from the northwestern border and planned to carry out sabotage operations. No further details were provided about the incident, and no reference was published to the elimination reports since the morning hours. And on the southern front, is Israel preparing for renewed fighting in the Gaza Strip? The IDF struck with artillery in the southern Gaza Strip. All of this against the backdrop of the calls to return to fighting in Gaza. The defense establishment believes that this is not the right time for a broad escalation. Now, according to the military, Hamas, in the current reality, does not have significant levers of pressure on Israel, and therefore this should be used to increase pressure on the terrorist organization. Senior defense officials emphasize that the Gaza Strip is not currently the main arena, and that Israel must focus on the threat from Iran and Lebanon, as well as on the emerging escalation in Judea and Samaria. And meanwhile, the IDF continues to fight the Hezbollah terrorist organization. Following the non-stop launches from Lebanon, and in response to the attack on IDF forces, the Air Force launched a wave of strikes against Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon. The IDF expanded its activity in southern Lebanon following the attacks on the forces and Hezbollah's violations of the ceasefire agreement. Later in the night, a truck was transferring weapons that was also destroyed. The secondary explosions heard at the site indicated the ammunition load was very substantial. And inside Lebanon itself, a quiet revolution is beginning to appear. It seems that this time, the Lebanese public wants change. It takes diplomatic courage, political courage, and foresight to commission a corruption report about your own country. That's exactly what the Lebanese government headed by President Youssef Aoun and Prime Minister Nawaf Salam did, a government made up of 24 ministers, which is standing firm also on uprooting the Hezbollah terrorist organization from within its territory. The DGC diagnostic report, Diagnostic of Government and Corruption, officially determines that Lebanon is a corrupt state. Time will tell whether the framework agreements between Israel and Lebanon will give birth to real peace. But at least from an economic standpoint, we can see our northern neighbors' efforts to put an end to long years of chaos, of corruption, and Iranian control through Hezbollah. So there's a lot ahead of us. Let's dive into the details. I'm Ali Shoshani. Tonight, Yair Pinto's on vacation. We are boots on the ground, bringing you the entire truth about what's happening in Israel and about the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. 1 second before we begin, I want to call on you to continue spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible, click the subscribe button, and most importantly, don't forget to look for me, Mati Shoshani, and Yair Pinto on social media to get a view through our eyes of what it's like to live in Israel under war. Since the war began, more and more people in Israel are struggling. Families, elderly, and those who simply need a hot meal today. At Meir Panim's Jerusalem branch, thousands of meals are prepared and served. But to keep feeding people safely, the facility itself must be safe and fully operational. This renovation is not about making the place look nicer. It's about safety and basic operations. The kitchen sinks were backing up. Tiles were falling from the walls, and the building needed urgent repairs so the meals could keep coming out. Your gift helps keep this kitchen open, the meals going, and hope reaching people who need it most. Please give today at bless-israel.org. That's bless-israel.org. Donate now and help feed Israel's most vulnerable. Excellent. Let's continue. I now want to give you a broad look at what is happening in the Middle East in order to organize things for just a moment. What is really happening in the Middle East? I mean, is there an agreement? Is there a ceasefire between Iran and the United States? Well, what about Lebanon? What about Gaza? How is it that we've been hearing for months about a ceasefire taking place, a memorandum of understanding, first between the United States and Iran, then between Israel, Lebanon, and the United States, and yet fighting continues. Well, if that's your sense, you're 100% correct. That's exactly where we are. We're in a bizarre situation right now. The Iranian regime doesn't necessarily want an agreement. It doesn't necessarily serve them. They want to survive. They want to hold on. They want to persevere. They want to remain in power. Where do we see this? In recent days, over the Strait of Hormuz, we've seen the Iranians openly threaten ships traveling through the straits that were traveling. How do I explain this? Let's say this is the coast of Oman and Iran is over here. Well, they were obviously trying to travel close to Oman, opposing Iran. And essentially, Iran gets on the radio and says to the ships, hey guys, if you don't come towards our coast where we're telling you to come, we're coming to get you. And you can literally see in the ship tracking websites, the ships make a turn, head north, and sail across or along the Iranian coast. Why do they do this? Because they're afraid of Iran. And the same thing applies to Lebanon. Israel continues to fight against the Hezbollah terrorist organization, despite or even because of the fact that there's a memorandum of understanding between Israel, the Lebanese government, and the US. The Hezbollah terrorists are doing the exact opposite. They're trying to continue fighting. They're trying as best they can to hold on to their infrastructure, to hold on to their locations throughout the area of Lebanon. And why are they doing that? Because Hezbollah is an important and expensive, a vital component of the Iranian proxy warfare mechanism. And they don't want to disappear, and they want to continue threatening Israel. So we have a memorandum, but it's not being upheld. We have a ceasefire, but there's fighting that's happening on an almost daily basis. The Strait of Hormuz should be opening, but instead the Iranians are threatening. And between us, I would imagine, and this is me guessing here, that many of these ships are paying something, at least to the Iranian regime, to allow them safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. And in Lebanon, the same thing. We're talking about ceasefire, and yet here we are. Israel continues to fight against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Same applies to the Gaza Strip. What was supposed to be an international intervention preventing Hamas from continuing aggression in the Gaza Strip is Israel once again having to fight against Hamas that's trying to embed itself in the people of Gaza. Why do I say this? Because we always come back to the same conclusion. There's only one long-term solution for all of this. The long-term solution was and is diplomatic, was and is agreements, more than military power. There is no bombing mission. Well, let's put it this way. There's no bombing mission that US or Israel are willing to carry out that will be able to stop Iran from terrorizing ships traveling through the Strait of Hormuz. And there is no mission in Lebanon against Hezbollah that can do what an agreement with the Lebanese government and building the Lebanese fighting force will be able to do, which is to remove Hezbollah. And the same applies to Hamas Gaza. The only long-term solution for Hamas in Gaza is to fight against Hamas, to remove them and have some other government come in. We are in the in-between. We're in the twilight zone. We're in the area between agreements and non-agreements. We're in the area between the need to really move forward and do something of substance in an agreement and the fact that the Iranian regime doesn't really want to do that. Now, add to that the factor that most likely the Iranian regime is unable to reach an agreement. We keep seeing increasing and ever-increasing signs of the internal rifts within the Iranian regime, between IRGC officials and the civil servants, between the foreign minister or the president and people in the IRGC or the Ayatollahs. Are they controlling the supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei? Maybe. Maybe he's isolated intentionally. Are they controlling what the civil government does? It seems like it. It seems like every time someone tries to say something that goes against IRGC lines, they're cut off broadcast or publicly, humiliated by IRGC or their people or by their actions on the ground. And this shows us an ever-increasing and ever-present problem in which, Iran doesn't have one cohesive leadership. Iran doesn't have the desire to have one cohesive, one strong, one clear leadership, but rather multiple different entities fighting for power. This was especially present these last couple days in the ongoing funeral and memorial services to Ali Khamenei, the eliminated supreme leader that was assassinated or was removed by Israel and the United States in an operation that took place on the opening strikes of this war back in late February of this year. And we see even there the tension between the different factions, the fighting between the different factions, the difficulty to reach a conclusion. That's where we are. That's where we remain. That's where we will continue to be until something conclusive happens. And I want to end on a hopeful note before we go back to the news, which is that we don't really know when regimes topple. No one knows. Anyone who tells you they know hasn't been studying history, because it's always a surprise. It always comes when you're not expecting it or least expecting it. And it always comes when, in retrospect, everyone says, we see the signs. But in reality, the signs are not there. The signs are there only when, and I say this openly, only when you see them already happened. And that's where we are right now. We're waiting to see this happen to the regime in Iran, to see it topple. We're waiting to see the regime change in the country of Lebanon, and the same to happen in Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip. We need different regimes. We're looking forward to seeing them, and we're looking forward to seeing these regimes topple and fall. Let's get back to the news. In Tehran, they tried to turn Ali Khamenei's funeral into a show of control. Millions in the streets, black flags, calls for revenge against Israel and the United States, dozens of foreign delegations, and senior regime officials standing together in front of the cameras. But inside this entire staged image, the most important man was missing: Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei, the son, the heir, the new leader of Iran. And this is where the real question begins. If the Supreme Leader can't appear even at his own father's funeral, who's really running the Islamic Republic today? This funeral was meant to send one message: Iran is alive, the regime is standing, and the axis is still connected. After months of war, after the assassination of Ali Khamenei on the first day of Operation Roar of the Lion, and after American and Israeli strikes that pushed Tehran into defense mode, the Iranians wanted one large image of strength. Heads of state from the region arrived. Representatives from Russia, Iraq, Pakistan, Armenia, Tajikistan, India, Bangladesh, Turkey, and others all passed through Tehran. The regime wanted to show the world, you can't isolate us. But precisely at the moment when the regime needed to show a face, it showed fear and hesitation. Mojtaba Khamenei has not been seen in public since his appointment back in March. According to the reports, he asked to participate in the funeral ceremonies and even wanted to recite the funeral prayer over his father's coffin. The regime's security officials vetoed it. Their concern is clear. One public appearance could turn him into a target. Not only a target for assassination, but also a target for surveillance. Anyone who sees him can understand where he is hiding, how he moves, who protects him, and who is still loyal to him. The means or the meaning of this goes much deeper than one single ceremony. A supreme leader in Iran is not supposed to be a hidden figure. He is supposed to be the source of authority. He is supposed to appear, decide, and project a clear line. Instead, Mojtaba is operating like a ghost leader. He approves things from a distance, sends messages through others, and leaves the political arena open to power struggles. And meanwhile, inside Iran, the fight is no longer hidden. In the past, the main line was simple: conservatives versus reformists. Today, the split inside the conservative camp itself. On one side stand President Masoud Pezeshkian, Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Khalibaf, parts of the security establishment, and officials who understand that continuing to confront with the United States could break their economy. On the other side stand hardliners, who accuse the negotiating team of betrayal and demand that Iran make no concessions on anything, not on the nuclear program, not on missiles, and not on regional control. This split has already left the closed rooms. A live broadcast was cut while Ghalibaf tried to explain details of the ceasefire. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi was booed in Iraq. Hardline activists shouted against appeasers, and state television became a platform for strong attacks against those handling the contacts with Washington. This is not normal criticism. This is the war of succession over Iran's future direction. And the reason this struggle is erupting now is not only ideology, it is also the economy. At the top of the Iranian leadership, they understand that the country is approaching a breaking point. According to the reports, the governor of the central bank warned of a severe shortage of food and medicine if restrictions on oil and maritime trade return in full. President Pezeshkian even threatened to resign if a framework that would reduce the pressure is not approved. That's why Mojtaba approved the continuation of contacts from a distance. But the hardline street is not satisfied with appeasal from a distance. When the leader is not seen, others enter the empty space. The Revolutionary Guards are strengthening their power. Senior officials in the regime are already hinting that the era in which the supreme leader always has the final word may be over. The decisions, it seems, are gradually moving into security circles and power groups. Now, on the American side, Trump is using exactly this moment. In a festive speech marking the 250th Independence Day of the United States, he boasted that Iran now wants a deal. He said the Americans gave Tehran a week to hold the funeral because they are nice, quote unquote. Behind this sentence, there's a very tough message. Washington sees itself as the one setting the pace in Iran's mourning, in the negotiations, and in relations with Israel. And that brings us to Jerusalem. Trump and Netanyahu spoke, and they may meet at the White House after the NATO summit in Turkey. But here, too, the atmosphere is complicated. Trump said Netanyahu requested a meeting and added the usual sentence, he knows who the boss is. That is not a sentence said by accident. It signals to Israel, Iran, and the entire region that the White House wants to control the timetable. When Israel acts, when it waits, and when the move shifts from the military campaign to the negotiations table. Guys, what you see on YouTube is only part of the story. Get closer to first-hand reports, behind-the-scenes moments, and stories of faith, resilience, and hope from Israel at TBN, which is www.tbn.org/journeys/boots, or text boots to 316-316 for direct updates from TBN Israel. With me, Mati Shoshani, and Yael reporting directly from Israel. You're not just watching the news, you're seeing what's happening in Israel on the ground in real time. We share what's really happening through a Christian perspective rooted in truth, faith, and the people living it every day. Your support helps deliver on-the-ground reports, real stories of resilience and hope, and trusted coverage that connects Christians to Israel. But while the diplomats are talking about an agreement, the images from the ground tell a very different story. In the Memorandum of Understanding, Iran committed not to obtain or develop nuclear weapons and to preserve the status quo of its nuclear program, but new satellite images raise a major question mark over an underground site in the Zagros Mountains, known as Pickaxe Mountain. At Natanz, Fordow, and Isfahan, almost no unusual activity is visible. In Natanz, the access roads to the underground enrichment halls have still not been restored. At Isfahan, the tunnel entrances remain covered with dirt. At Fordow, obstacles, dirt berms, and roadblocks can be seen, slowing movement towards the tunnel entrances. But at Pickaxe Mountain, the picture is different. There, vehicle movements can be seen on the roads leading to the western tunnel entrances. And according to assessments, work is continuing inside the complex and entrances are being reinforced. This is a especially sensitive site. The IAEA inspectors were not allowed to visit it. Work there has continued, according to assessments, since at least 2020. It is dug deep into a granite mountain at a depth estimated at around 80 to 100 meters, or up to over 300 feet, and is considered one of the most fortified sites in Iran's nuclear program. The question is not only what is there now, the question is why Iran continues to work there while committing to preserve the status quo. Let's put it simply. Tehran may be freezing what the world can see, but it is keeping an insurance policy in place the world can almost not see. At the same time, Iran is trying to open an economic window for itself. After the freeze of some American sanctions, the National Iranian Oil Company began preliminary contacts with companies in Japan about renewing oil exports. If it happens, this would be the first deal of its kind since 2019. But the road there is full of obstacles. The American waiver is limited in time, until August the 21st. Sailing from the Gulf to Japan takes time. Refineries want regulatory certainty. They want maritime insurance and a guarantee that tankers will pass safely through the Strait of Hormuz. And Hormuz has still not returned to being a normal route. In recent weeks, there were reports of a cargo ship attacked by Iranian forces, of a demand by the Revolutionary Guards that every vessel coordinate in advance before crossing the strait, and of assessments that dozens of naval mines are still present in the central part of the waterway. The very same time, Iran's ambassador to China said explicitly that Iran will collect transit fees in Hormuz and that it is advancing new arrangements with Oman for security, for oversight, and environmental management. Here we need to understand the Iranian game. On the one hand, Tehran wants to sell oil to Japan, to receive foreign currency, and to break its almost total dependence on China. On the other hand, it is not giving up on the attempt to turn Hormuz into a pressure tool. In other words, Iran wants the world to pay it in order to return to the market, and at the same time, receive permission from it to pass through the most important maritime route in the region. And this front is not disconnected from Lebanon. On the contrary, Lebanon has become a central clause in the struggle between Iran and the United States. Hezbollah is now in the war for survival. The organization has suffered severe blows, is replacing commanders, hiding their identities, reducing large command centers, and opening internal investigations after serious intelligence failures. It no longer operates like an organization confident in itself. It operates like an organization afraid of every phone, every movement, every exposed location. The IDF is taking advantage of that. After IDF forces were hit in the security zone in southern Lebanon, the Israeli Air Force struck about 10 Hezbollah infrastructure facilities in the area of Bin Jbal, Bet Yahun, Kin, and Barachit. The strikes were carried out under the direction of Division 91, and the targets were used to advance terrorist plans against the forces on the ground. Later that night, forces from Division 91, or the 91st Division, identified a Hezbollah cell moving weapons in a truck near the security zone. The Air Force struck the truck, and after the hit, secondary explosions were seen too. That is an important detail, because secondary explosions indicate that there were indeed weapons inside the truck. In the background of that activity, a reserve soldier, was seriously wounded in an encounter in southern Lebanon. This is a reminder that even within the framework of an agreement, the security zone is still alive, dangerous, and very active. Now, Hezbollah is testing the limits. The IDF is responding, and the agreement is being tested, not in documents, but on the ground, in the orchards, in the villages, on the roads, and in the tunnels. One of the major symbols of the depth of Iranian involvement in Lebanon is the underground facility uncovered in Majd al-Zun. This is not just another weapons warehouse. It is a complex built over years, like an underground airport for drones. From there, drones were launched that hit the north, the center, and the deadly incident at the Golani base. This infrastructure was built over about 20 years with Iranian planning, funding, and thought. This is an Iran inside Lebanon, not only Hezbollah. Hezbollah's condition is difficult in members as well. According to assessments presented in Israel, the organization has suffered very heavy numbers of casualties and wounded. At the same time, Iran is trying to help it recover. There are reports of recruiting volunteers in exchange for payment, attempts to rebuild infrastructure, and smuggling attempts into the southern arena as well, including through Sinai and additional routes. Some of the attempts are carried out with drones. Later, Iran may also try to use the maritime route. From Israel's perspective, this is an ongoing red line, not allowing Iran to give Hezbollah and Hamas back what they lost throughout the war. And inside Lebanon too, the ground is shifting. The government in Beirut is trying to present a different path. Economic reforms, rebuilding of the banking system, fighting corruption, and strengthening the Lebanese army instead of Hezbollah. A very high criticism internal report described the depth of corruption in the country, the weakness of institutions, the fragile rule of law, and the economic crisis. Lebanon's GDP is estimated at only around $20 billion. Inflation is high. Unemployment among young people reaches, according to assessments, around 50%, and the economy is far too dependent on cash, smuggling, and corruption. If the trilateral agreement between Lebanon, Israel, and the United States advances, it is supposed to prevent the flow of cash and reconstruction resources to armed non-state actors. This is a critical point, because if international money enters Lebanon and reaches Hezbollah again, the whole move will collapse. But if the Lebanese army truly enters the areas from which Israel withdraws, and if the money stays in the hands of the state and not in the hands of the militias, This could be a strategic change. At the very same time, even inside Iran itself, small and troubling fronts are opening. The Revolutionary Guards announced that they eliminated a terrorism cell that had infiltrated from the northwestern border and planned sabotage operations. The announcement came after reports that 2 Revolutionary Guard members had been killed in western Iran, and in parallel with the suspicious death of a senior naval commander in a car accident in Kerman. There are also reports of Kurdish organization along the border, thousands of fighters on the Iraqi side, and requests for weapons, drones, and support. Not all of these details are confirmed, but the very fact that the Revolutionary Guards are being forced to deal with internal and border threats during a leadership crisis says a great deal. This is the broader picture. Tehran is trying to project strength through the funeral, but it is hiding a leader. It is talking about an agreement, but continues working at a secret nuclear site. It is asking to return to the oil market, but threatening to control Hormuz. It is trying to save Hezbollah, but Hezbollah is already operating like an organization under an intelligence and military siege. The Iranian regime is still dangerous, but today is also more exposed, more pressured, and more divided from within. And the big question is whether the coming weeks will lead to an agreement that restrains Iran or to a temporary pause that allows it to regroup for the next round. Guys, keep spreading the truth, follow us, and most importantly, don't forget to click the subscribe button so that you stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss boots on the ground. Keep looking for me, Mati Shoshani, and Yael Pinto on social media to see life in Israel through our eyes. Now let's pray for the people of Israel. And I want to ask you guys to do this on a regular basis. The Bible commands us to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And this time that we're in calls also to pray for our leadership. So whatever your political opinions are, I want to ask you to pray for your president, Donald Trump, or whoever your leadership is. And as I pray for our leader, Prime Minister Netanyahu, to make the right decisions for our countries in this very difficult and hard time, to make the bold decisions, the brave decisions, but above all for God's desire and God's will on earth to really dictate what happens here. And lastly, don't forget to pray for the peace and the protection of the IDF soldiers, both men and women in uniform, and, of course, those in uniform in the United States forces also fighting in this region. Guys, be blessed. If you've stuck around this long, make sure you subscribe and follow us, and we'll see you all the next time.